start this craft off with a green foam ring from the Dollar Tree. This one is 9.8 inches. I'm going to put this onto a paintable surface, and I'm taking my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're just going to do a coat of paint around this whole entire wreath. And now once we have our wreath completely dry, I'm going to take some nautical rope from the Dollar Tree, and I'm taking my hot glue gun here, and I'm going to start wrapping this nautical rope around the wreath. And I'm going to continue wrapping this rope around the wreath until I have covered the entire wreath. Now, when I started this, I didn't know how many rolls of nautical rope I was going to need, but I ended up needing 4 rolls. So after that first one, I was able to determine how many rolls I would need. The one thing I did try to do when I was doing this is making sure that I glued the nautical rope on the back side of the wreath so that you would not see any of the seams. And now that our wreath is completely covered, I am going to grab a lighter and I'm just going to burn any of the little strings off of the rope. And this step is completely optional. I just really like the way it looks when you burn it like that. And now that everything is done, I'm going to go ahead and determine which part of the wreath I want for the top and which part I want for the bottom. And for the hanger on this wreath, I took the nautical rope and I untwisted it and then took one of the strands of the nautical rope, and I just am tying a knot with one strand at the top of my wreath, and I'm going to do a knot right there so it's right at the center so it will hang evenly. And then I'm just going to take this rope and I'm going to tie another circle there. I'll leave the extra strands on it for now until I decide where I'm going to hang it, so that way if I needed to make the loop bigger or smaller, I can do that. And a quick shout out to Courtney from Creative on the Cheap. She inspired me to make this wreath, and I just wanted to say thank you for your inspiration. Now for our next step, I'm taking a piece of scrap fabric and I'm going to be cutting out some little hearts. So I cut a heart template out of a piece of felt, and I'm just going to cut 6 little hearts out of this fabric. And now that we have those little hearts cut out, I'm going to take some black felt and I'm going to repeat the same step. I'm just going to take that little template that I made and I'm going to cut 6 more hearts out. And now that we have our 12 hearts cut out, I'm going to go ahead and just lay them on top of my wreath until I like the position that they're in. Now I'm going to take my hot glue and I'm just going to lift each one of these hearts up and just tack them down just slightly with the hot glue. Now I'm going to take some twine and I'm going to take this twine and I'm going to crisscross the hearts. And to start out, you want to go in one direction. So I went ahead and I just kind of laid the twine out over the heart the way I wanted it. And then I'm going to just tie a quick knot on the back side. And then keeping in the same direction, I'm going to wrap that twine around each one of the hearts. And once I've finished wrapping those hearts, I'll go ahead and tie another knot. And then I'm just repeating the same step, but this time we're making an X over the heart, so we're going the opposite direction. Now here's what our wreath looks like with all of that twine wrapped around the wreath, and you could leave it just like this and hang it this way. However, I wanted to add one more thing and I added a bow. And this ribbon I got at Walmart, and this is part of their Christmas ribbon, and I just love some of the Christmas ribbon that they have there. So if you've never checked it out, definitely check that out. Sometimes you can even find some of this ribbon on clearance depending on your store. And as you can see, I'm just doing a quick shoelace bow on the top of this wreath, just very basic and simple. And I'm just going to do a diagonal cut for my tails. And now that we've fluffed our bow, our wreath is ready to hang. I just love how this turned out. This is such a fun piece for the Valentine's Day season, or you can use this year-round. I love the neutral colors on this as well with the black and the white. It just makes it something that goes really well with a lot of different decor pieces. And if you enjoyed this craft, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button below. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you! So I've had this wood cutout leaf from the Dollar Tree for quite some time, and a few of these little heart wood pieces from the Dollar Tree. And I'm gonna make a cute little Valentine's tree with these. So I'm starting out by taking some painter's tape, and I'm gonna tape down my little hearts to the piece of cardboard here. And for this piece, I'm going to be using 6 of the larger hearts and 6 of the smaller hearts. Next, I grab my Folk Art black chalkboard paint, and I'm just going to paint the top row, so 3 of the large hearts and 3 of the small hearts with this paint. Now for the remaining 6 hearts, I am using my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I'm going to go ahead and paint those. And to completely cover that pink, I did have to do 3 coats of paint. And once that is complete, I flipped these over and I painted the other side. Now while that paint is drying, let's go back to our cutout. This leaf cutout I did get from the Dollar Tree a few years ago, and I'm just going to remove that hanger. You don't need to save it if you'd like, because we are not going to reuse it. Next, I grab my Waverly wax, and I'm going to go ahead and stain this whole entire leaf front and back. And once our leaf is completely dry, let's go ahead and put this together. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay out my hearts on top of this leaf. And I just want to figure out the right pattern and where I'm going to position everything. And what I decided was I'm using the larger hearts on 2 of the little stems that come out of the leaf, and then a smaller heart on the other one. And for the very top, I'm using a cutout that I had from the Dollar Tree in my stash and a leftover bow to put over the top of the hanger. And now that everything is in position, I'm taking my hot glue and I'm just going to hot glue everything into place. And to keep the hot glue from being too stringy, I did make sure to just use the hot glue on the leaf portion and not putting it onto the hearts directly, and then just placing the hearts on top of that. So then everything looks nice from the backside and you don't get a lot of the extra strings. So now that our little tree is complete, let's go ahead and put it in a little pot so it will stand up for us. So I'm using some of this floral foam, and I did get that at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to cut a small square out, and I'm going to place that inside my little clay pot here. And this clay pot I repurposed, I just repainted it white so that it would match our decor piece. And I did add a little bit of hot glue on the bottom of that foam just so it would stay in place a little bit better in that pot. Now I'm going to just insert this little tree leaf into my foam. And here is what it looks like standing up. Now I want to cover that foam up, and I was trying to decide what I should use, and I decided on using some Spanish moss. So the Spanish moss I did get from the Dollar Tree, but sometimes they don't always have it, so you may have to check one of your local crafts stores to see if you can find it. Now I'm gonna just add a little bit of hot glue over the top of the foam, and then I'm just gonna stick the Spanish moss on top. Then we'll give it a quick little haircut so that it looks nice and pretty. And that's all there is to it. This beautiful decor piece is ready to display. I just love the crisp look that the black and the white give it, and it has just a fun little farmhouse feel. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you. I found this love sign at the Dollar Tree, and I thought this would be a great piece to make over. So I'm going to start out by just removing all of the tinsel from this love sign. And when we're done, we're left with this plastic frame of the word love. So I'm going to take my floral clippers and I'm just going to go ahead and clip apart the letters. And don't forget to remove all of those little transitional pieces that were connecting everything. This will make it work a lot better. And now that we have all of our pieces disconnected, I am going to grab some of this chunky yarn. And using a little bit of hot glue, I'm going to just go ahead and hot glue the yarn to the tip of this L. And you want to make sure you cover that plastic up first before you start wrapping. So I make sure that I get a really nice edge on there so it looks very finished and polished. And then we'll just start slowly wrapping the yarn around the L shape. And every few wraps or so, I do add a tiny bit of hot glue to make sure everything stays into place. And when you get to the top of that L, you're going to do the same thing like you did at the beginning of the L, where you add a little bit of hot glue and you just really wrap that yarn around to make a really nice edge so you can't see any of that plastic. And now we just repeat that same step for all of our letters. So I found this blank at Walmart, and I'm going to go ahead and just put this down on a paintable surface. And using my Waverly chalk paint in the color ink, I'm going to give a nice coat of paint over this board. And once that paint has dried, I do flip this board over, and I noticed that the way that it wanted me to hang this board was going vertically, and I wanted to go horizontally. So I grabbed a paint stick and drew a line, and I'm taking my miter shears and I'm going to just go ahead and cut that paint stick down to size. And then to attach that paint stick, I'm using my wood glue from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to add a little bit of glue at the top of my board there. And then I'll just add that paint stick. Next, I'll grab two of my paint clips to just kind of clamp this into place, and I let this sit for about an hour to dry. And now that our board is all prepped, it is time for the fun part, putting this all together. I'm going to just start out by just laying everything out onto the board before I glue anything down. And once I'm satisfied with the placement of the letters, I'm going to take my hot glue and hot glue these letters onto the board. And once we have all of our letters attached to the board, you could leave it just like this, but I felt like it needed a little bit extra. So we are going to add a few embellishments. I'm going to hot glue a little raffia bow up on that O at the top of the O. And then also I'm going to take these paper flowers that I had in my stash, and I'm going to add one of the pink flowers to the center of that bow. And that's all there is to it. This beautiful love sign is ready to display. I just love how this one turns out. I would love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments below. For this craft, I'm going to use some of my air dry clay and mold that I had and some cookie cutters. And I'm just going to cut out some hearts. And with that leftover clay, I'm going to add that to my molds. And this will help me make some decorative pieces to add to my hearts. And once I figured out how I wanted to add all of my pieces, I grabbed out my triple thick glue. And I'm going to take that glue and I'm going to glue these pieces onto my clay hearts. And once I was satisfied with my hearts, I went ahead and I found this little wood cutout heart that I had in my stash. And I'm going to add this clay heart to the center of my cutout using that same tight bond glue. Next, I took some of these little clay cutout embellishments that I made, and I'm going to just position them around my heart until I'm satisfied with their placement. Next, I'll go ahead and take that tight bond glue and attach those to my heart. And once we have all of those attached, this is what we're left with. Next, I grab a piece of cardboard and I'm just going to tape down my heart to that cardboard. And then I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and I'm going to give a nice coat of paint to this heart all over the top and along the sides. And once that paint has completely dried, I'm grabbing my black licorice multi-surface paint from Folk Art. And using a dry brush, I'm going to get as much paint off the brush that I can, and then I'm going to just lightly brush over that heart to just bring out the details from the clay. And once I'm satisfied with the look, I'm going to set this aside to dry. Now here is one of those signs I've had in my craft stash for quite some time, and I did get this from the Dollar Tree. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove the backing from this sign. Next, I went ahead and removed any loose pieces of paper from this sign. Now I grabbed some Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and I'm just going to do a coat of paint over the BU on here. Because the scrapbook paper that I want to put over the top is a lighter pink in color, I just wanted to make sure that red didn't show through. And once our square is completely dry, I am going to grab my straight edge and do a quick measurement to see what this is, and it is a 5x5 square. And then using our paper cutter, we go ahead and cut our scrapbooking paper to size. And to attach my paper to my board, I'm just using a glue stick. And to make sure I have a nice smooth finish, I use my roller and I just go ahead and I roll that paper onto the board. Now that we have all of our pieces complete, let's put this all together. To attach the heart to our scrapbooking paper, I am going to be using some tight bond glue and a little bit of hot glue. And once we have our heart centered, I go ahead and I add our backing back into our frame. And now our decor heart is complete. I just love how this sign turns out. This is something we could hang on a door hanger. You could put this on a tray or on a shelf. For this craft, we're starting out with these 2 wood pieces, and both of them are from plaid, and you can get these at Walmart. I'm taking that love piece and I'm going to just put that down onto a paintable surface, and I like to tape them down with a piece of painter's tape so nothing moves around while I'm trying to paint. Now I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I'm going to just paint the top part of this love sign. I don't want to paint the sides on this one because I really like the wood look, and I think that's going to give our piece a lot more dimension by not doing that. Now going back to our wood blank here, I am going to flip this over and remove that piece of paper for the heart. And I'm going to keep that piece of paper and we're going to use it as a template. There is no glass or anything in this piece. It is just a wood piece. And since I'm trying to craft my stash, I'm going to take a piece of cardboard here and I'm going to trace that heart onto the cardboard. Now, if you had black cardstock, that would work great as well, and you could skip the step where I'm having to paint my piece of cardboard. So once I have everything traced, I'm just going to cut my heart out, and then I'm going to put this down onto a paintable surface. And I'm going to paint both the front and the back side with my black chalk paint. Now going back to that promo heart that was inside of our piece, I'm going to take that and I'm just going to fold it in half. And we're going to take this little piece of paper here and I'm grabbing some scrap fabric and I'm just going to cut out a heart. So you see that I'm just folding down my fabric in half and I'm placing that half piece of heart right on top. Then I'm going to take some pins and I'm just going to pin that piece of paper to my fabric so it's more of a template, so it'll be easier for me to cut out. And now that our heart is cut out, we can just remove those pins and then we'll unfold and see our beautiful heart. Now we need to attach this fabric to our piece of cardboard. And all I'm going to do for this is use a glue stick and I'm just going to apply the glue and then set the fabric on top. Then I take my roller and I'm just going to roll over the top of the fabric to make sure it stays nice and tight. And once that glue has dried, I go ahead and flip our heart over and trim any excess fabric from the cardboard. Now let's go ahead and set that heart aside, and I grabbed this wood cutout heart that I found from Dollar Tree a few years back, and it's been sitting in my stash for quite some time. Now using my Waverly Antique Wax, I'm going to go ahead and apply this with a baby wipe and stain the front side of this heart. Then go ahead and set this aside to dry. Now let's go back to the wood cutout frame that we started with. I'm taking some painter's tape and I'm just going to tape two pieces on the back side and then set this down onto a paintable surface. This will keep it from moving around too much and make it much easier to paint. Now using my folk art chalkboard paint, I'm going to paint the whole entire frame, the front, the back, and the sides. And I did do 2 full coats because I wanted it to look really nice. And now that we have all of our components ready to go, let's put all of this together. First, we're going to take our wood heart cutout and using some hot glue, we'll attach that to our fabric heart. Once everything is secure, to cover the hanger hole, I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue and then just put a little black bow right on top. Now let's flip over our frame and insert this heart back into the frame. For our next step, I'm going to grab the love wood piece and I'm going to flip this over, and on the back side, I'm going to add a little bit of wood glue. And once I've added the wood glue, I grabbed a paintbrush and I'm just going to paint that on really thin so it coats the whole entire back side of this piece. Then we're just gonna flip that over and place that onto our frame. And now for some final touches, I'm adding a little raffia bow to the top of our frame and a paper flower that I had in my stash to this piece right underneath that bow. And now here is our beautiful piece. I just love how this turns out. It's simple but farmhouse. And it is so elegant and versatile. You can take that farmhouse decor piece out of the center and put a photo of it in there instead, or just leave it with the decor piece. And if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that subscribe or like button below. Thank you. For this craft, we're going to need a napkin, a 4x6 canvas, and 2 colors of paint that you love. The paint colors that I'm using are Flamingo Red from Apple Barrel and Ballet from Waverly Chalk Paint. So I'm going to start out by just painting a nice little layer of the pink paint on the bottom of my canvas. And once I've completed that, I'm going to take a little bit of that pink paint and I'm going to put that in the center between the pink and the red and add just a tiny bit of that red paint so we get a little bit darker pink. And we will then take that pink paint and we're just going to paint another layer. Now we'll just repeat the same step and we're going to add a little bit more pink and a lot more red. And we're going to just continue going up the canvas, adding layers of paint. This is just going to give a faded look of a darker layer going up the canvas until we get to the red paint. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you can see all of the layers as I paint them on this canvas. But if you haven't tried doing this with a canvas, it is definitely beginner friendly and they turn out amazing and you can use any colors that you would like to combine. For my last step here with the painting, I am going to take the darker color paint and use that for the perimeter of my canvas, but you could paint that with black if you'd like, or you could just paint all the way down the edges when you're painting the front of the canvas and have that layered look going all the way around. Set the canvas aside and we're going to unfold our napkin. I'm using a piece of painter's tape to help take the layers off, but painter's tape, masking tape, they all work really well in helping getting that, especially that second to third layer that most napkins have, because that layer really sticks to that front top layer. And you want just that top layer of the napkin. And once we have that top layer of the napkin, I'm going to cut out just one of the squares. Then we'll set that aside with a little bowl of water and a paintbrush. And using our paintbrush, I'm going to go around the perimeter of this little heart on our napkin. Next, we're going to take our fingers and we're going to just lightly tear around the perimeter of the heart. And you just take both fingers and just go really lightly. And this tears fairly easily, so you got to be a little bit careful when you do this. And once you have teared around the outside of whatever item you are on your napkin, I take a little heat tool and I dry everything on the napkin just to make sure everything is dry and looks the way that I would like it. Grab our canvas and our little piece of napkin. And I'm just going to set that napkin on top of our canvas and decide where I would like it on the canvas. And eyeballing it, I'm going to take some of that lighter colored pink paint and I will paint a heart on the canvas where I would like that napkin to be. And I'm going to just fill that in with that lighter colored paint. I do this because I want my napkin to really be bright on my canvas. And so this will help make the colors in the napkin stand out by having a lighter color underneath it. Let's go ahead and grab some Mod Podge. And I'm using the matte Mod Podge. I feel like this is a better fit for my canvas. And I'm going to just paint around the outside edge of my heart. And we're just going to continue doing that all the way around the perimeter. And then we'll lightly paint over the whole entire heart. So while we have a quick moment, I wanted to say thank you to all my current subscribers. Without you, I couldn't continue to grow. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd like to invite you to subscribe so you can be a part of this channel and all of its fun. Now back to our project. Once we've completed the Mod Podge, I use a heat tool to get the drying process started. And now that everything is dry, I grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and a round brush. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take just a little bit of a dry brush and just go right around the heart to give a nice finished edge on that canvas. And wow, this turns out so great. Now, I added a little bow at the top corner. That's totally optional, but I just felt like I needed a little bit more since it's such a small piece. And wow, I love how this turns out. It gives the painting such an amazing look using that napkin and all of those intricate pieces. So the Dollar Tree carries these little paintable rocks from time to time for different seasons. And I don't really like the paints that come with it. They're just not enough colors and choices. So I've decided that I'm going to decoupage this little heart and see what happens. So we're using some Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. Just going to use that paint and coat the entire rock. Once that paint has completely dried, I'm taking a napkin and we're just going to use the top layer of the napkin. And I use some painter's tape to help pull the top layer off of the bottom two layers of the napkin. And for this project, we're only going to need a quarter of the napkin. Now back to our heart rock. I'm using a mini little bowl to elevate my heart rock, but you can use whatever you can find that will elevate that up so you have a little bit of space. Next, I'm using some Mod Podge and I'm using the matte finish because I like that finish better. And I'm going to go ahead and just put a little dab of the Mod Podge in the center of my rock, and then I'll set down that piece of napkin and center it the way that I would like. Our next step here is very simple. We're just taking the Mod Podge and we're just going to paint from the center and going down the sides of the heart. We're going to just coat the napkin with the Mod Podge. The nice thing of having a bowl or something underneath your piece of rock, it helps you twist the item around so you're not having to move around the table as you're painting down that Mod Podge. Once you're satisfied with your Mod Podge, I take my heat tool and I just kind of give the Mod Podge a little bit of a helping hand and allow it to start the drying process. I then let this dry for about a half an hour after that to make sure everything was set on the rock. And once everything is dry, I grab my zip sander, but a sanding block would be just fine, and I just sand around the outside edge of the rock and remove any of the excess napkin. Now you could stop here and use this rock the way it is, but I thought I'd add a little bit more to this rock. So I'm using some Rub and Buff in the color Silver. I saw another creator use this technique, so I thought I'd try it this time. And I used a makeup applicator to apply the Rub and Buff to the pieces of the rock that I wanted to emphasize. I didn't expect to get that much Rub and Buff on my rock, so I did use a baby wipe to wipe off any of the excess. Once you're satisfied with the look, go ahead and set this aside to dry. And this rock now is ready to be used as a paperweight or on a tiered tray. Now for our next craft, we're starting out with an 18 by 5 inch wood cutout from the Dollar Tree. And I'm using my Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm gonna stain both sides of this plank. Now while this is drying, I'm going to grab 30 half beads, and I'm taking these half beads and I'm gonna place them on a paintable surface here. And I'm using some painter's tape to just put lines of painter's tape onto this piece of cardboard. And then I'm just gonna lay these out onto that painter's tape so they don't move around. Now you could put all of these in a plastic bag and just put some paint in and paint them that way, but I found that it's better sometimes to not have the paint on the back side of it because they stick better onto your surface. So this is why I'm doing it this way, but you can do it whatever way you like. Next, I grab my folk art chalkboard paint, and I'm going to do a nice coat of paint around each one of these beads. Then we'll go ahead and set these aside to dry and go back to our board. The first thing I do is I look at both sides of the board and determine which side is going to be the front and which side is going to be the back. And then for the front side of the board, I'm taking my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to do a light dry brush over the top of the front. Once I've done a little bit of paint, I actually took a small spray bottle of water and I sprayed a little bit of water over the top of that white plaster paint. And then I'm just going to brush that in as well. And it gives it a nice foggy, weathered look. And once we're happy with the color, we go ahead and let that dry for a little bit. Next, I'm going to go back to those little half beads we painted earlier, and I'm going to divide them into 2 groups of 15. Now I'm going to go ahead and arrange these beads into 2 little X's onto my plank. So I'm just going to move them around until I'm satisfied with the position of the X. And then I'm going to lay out one of these heart-shaped grapevine wreaths underneath it. And that'll be our O. And we're going to just do that XOXO and repeat both of these steps. And once we have our spacing worked out, we're going to go ahead and glue these pieces on. And I am going to glue these half beads on with my Titebond Quick and Thick glue. And I really like this glue. So if you're in the market for an all-purpose glue, I'd give this one a try. I found it on Amazon, but I've also seen it at Lowe's and Home Depot. But I do have a link for it in my description box below if you're interested. So all I'm going to do here is glue all of these little half beads on to our plank. And once the glue has dried, I'm going to grab my Waverly Antique Wax in white. And I'm taking a wax brush here, and I'm just going to go ahead and brush that over the top of our X's. And once they are lightly covered with wax, I'm going to take a lint-free cloth, and I'm just going to wipe that wax kind of off. It's just going to buff it a little bit and give it more of a weathered look. And now to attach our little hearts. Once I found the right side of the heart that laid the flattest against our piece, I am using my Titebond glue with a little bit of hot glue, and I'm going to push this down onto our plank. And this is a little bit, it's not very flat on this piece of wreath, so you have to really press that down. And then I use some little clips that I have from the Dollar Tree. They're little pink clips. And I'm just going to clamp that into place for about an hour because I want to make sure these stay on nice and tight. And then I just repeat the same step for the second heart. Don't forget, keep these clamped for at least 1 hour so that they are secure and in place. And now that everything has dried, we'll go ahead and remove the clamps. Now for some final embellishments. I love these paper flowers. I found them on clearance at Big Box, which I believe got them from Michael's because it's a clearance store. And I have been using them so much in my crafts lately, and I just am really enjoying them. So for this one, I'm just going to hot glue 3 of these flowers, 2 of them onto the heart and 1 onto the very top of our sign. So quick story here. My daughter walked in while I was making this, and she has discovered 90s country music. And she said, XOXO, that's the Trisha Yearwood song, Mom. And I said, oh yeah, you're right. So this is going to be going in her room for her decor piece. So if you like 90s country music, what is your favorite song from then? Let me know in the comments below. So we're going to start out today with this Valentine's Day sign that I had from last year. It was just some little hearts that spelled out the word welcome. And I'm removing 2 of these hearts and we're going to reuse them in our next 2 crafts. To remove the L and the E, I'm using some water and I'm just going to spray that lightly on top and just a little scraper to scrape everything off of these hearts. And you can totally skip this step if you have 2 plain hearts and you don't need to remove anything from them. I just like to use some of the items that I have on hand, so I'm not spending too much on my craft supplies. So now back to our craft. So once these hearts are prepped and ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take that caulking and I'm just going to make some little swirls on one of the hearts. And then the next step is let this dry overnight. So the next day, once everything has dried completely, I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're just going to do a nice coat of paint over the top of the heart and the caulking. Now, I find that I end up collecting a lot of craft supplies in my craft stash, and this was a little piece of canvas that I did not use from another project. So it's basically, I used the outside frame for something different, and this was the leftover canvas. And once I have that canvas taped down, I'm taking my caulking and I'm just going to do the same thing and put some fun swirls all over the top of the canvas and then let this sit overnight. Now let's prep a few beads. I'm taking a bamboo skewer and some clear tape and then adding our beads so that they don't slide around too much. And this will make it easier to paint them. A great technique when you're only painting a few beads and you want a nice thick layer of paint on them. For these beads, I'm going to paint them in the color Plaster by Waverly chalk paint. Let's return back to our beautiful heart. I grabbed my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ink, and I'm taking a rounded brush and we're just going to dry brush around the caulking on the hearts and then around the edge of the heart. And I'm using my heat tool just to make sure everything is completely dry. And I'm then taking some plaster paint and I'm just going to fade in that black. Let's move back over to our canvas. I'm taking one of my dowels, and these dowels I did get at the Dollar Tree in a pack of 15. I'm going to trim the canvas up so that I have about 1/2 inch of dowel on either side of the canvas. So let's take all of the components we made and make our beautiful canvas. The first step is taking one of our 2 dowels and we're taking a little bit of hot glue and we're going to just set the top of the canvas on the top of the dowel, leaving about 1/2 inch on either side. And next, I'm going to flip this canvas over and we're just going to repeat that step, adding a little bit of hot glue and rolling it down. And I want to do this 3 times, maybe 4, just to make sure I have a nice secured canvas. Next, we're going to lay the canvas upside down on our green mat. And this will just help me align that second dowel so that it's even when we roll it down, so it's not lopsided. And now that our dowels are secure, let's take the beads and attach them to the ends of the dowel. Originally, I was going to attach them to the top and the bottom, but I decided that I liked it just being on the top of our little canvas. Now, using some hot glue, let's go ahead and attach our heart to the center of our canvas. And to incorporate our twine into our sign, let's add a twine bow to the top of our heart. Let's construct a hanger now for our canvas. I'm using some burlap ribbon, and this burlap ribbon I did get at the Dollar Tree, and it did wrinkle a little bit because of it being wrapped around that cardboard, so I just used a quick little iron and ironed out some of those wrinkles so it's a little bit flatter. Once I've done that, I go ahead and I divide it into 2 pieces, and we're going to use some hot glue and hot glue this to the back of our canvas. The last step here is we flip the canvas over and tie a little bow at the top so it makes it easy for us to hang this beautiful canvas. And I love how this canvas turned out. It's something you can use at Valentine's Day, but could use all year around. So for this next craft, we're going to use a heart from the Dollar Tree and some all-purpose caulking. For this caulking, we're just going to write out the word love on the front of this heart. Now this caulking does take a little while to dry. I waited overnight before I did anything else. Now using my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, we're going to go ahead and paint a nice coat of paint over the top of the caulking and the heart. Once that has completely dried, I could grab my ink colored Waverly chalk paint, and using just a dry brush, I'm going to go over the letters love. Then I'm going to lift this heart up and I just lightly brush around the outside layer of the heart. While that is drying, I went ahead and I taped down another heart, and this heart I did get at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to paint it in the color plaster as well. And this is one of those heart tags that you can usually get in the craft or square section. And I noticed that the white paint was not covering that white little lines around the heart very well. So what I did was just a little extra layer of paint just around the edge, and then just did a second coat over the top just to conserve some of my paint. Next, I grabbed a dry brush and I'm going to dry brush a little bit of that black ink around the outside edge of the heart to give it more of a rustic look. Next, let's cover that hole on the heart. Using some hot glue and a cute little bow, we're just going to go ahead and hot glue a twine bow over the top. I wanted to give the bow a little more character, and I decided to add a little black button out of my button stash, and I just hot glued that right to the center of the bow, and I thought that gave it a nice finished look. For our next component, I'm going to grab a dowel from the Dollar Tree, and I'm using the black colored ink, and all I did was put a little bit of black ink onto my baby wipe, and I just wiped that down on the dowel. Now, once that dowel has completely dried, we're going to go ahead and glue that to our little heart that we made. And I'm using just some hot glue and a clip to keep that in place. And once that has completely dried, I'll add a little bit more hot glue and a small piece of ribbon over the top of that just to make sure nothing moves. Now let's put our components together. I'm going to start out with some ribbon that I got at Walmart and a little wood palette that I found at the Dollar Tree. And we're just going to wrap that ribbon and hot glue a layer around this palette. And I wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you. Thank you for subscribing to this channel. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button below and be notified anytime I upload a new video. Now that our ribbon is attached, let's take some hot glue and attach our love heart to the center of that ribbon. Let's continue putting everything together. Using our love palette, I'm going to use a small wood box, and we're going to attach the wood box to the back side of the love palette. So I'm using some blue painter's tape to tape the palette to the box so that I have everything straight the way I'd like it for it to be attached. Let's remove the love palette from the box and the painter's tape. And we'll leave the painter's tape on the box so we can use that to secure our love palette back on. And I'm using hot glue and a little bit of wood glue to attach everything. With the blue painter's tape right where we want it to be, we could just lift that up and help it secure the love palette to the box. So I felt like the palette was missing just a little bit more flair, so I'm going to add a little bow to the top of this palette. Now we could leave this palette box just the way it is, but I thought we needed to add a little bit more to this box. So we're starting out with a eucalyptus pick from Walmart, and I'm just going to bend the bottom piece up and stick that in the back side of this box. Last step here is we'll take that heart that we put on the dowel and add that to our box in the back side. And this turns out so amazing. This will look wonderful on a desk or on a shelf. So this craft starts out with an unusual item, a hair roller from the Dollar Tree. And what I'm going to do here is I'm taking the little circle off of the top of the hair roller. And you can see that there's a metal rod in the hair roller. And that's what we're going to use for our craft. So what we're going to do with this metal rod is I'm going to fold it in the shape of a V, and then we're going to shape it into the shape of a heart. And using the two little hooks on this metal rod, we're going to hook them together. And once you're satisfied with your heart, I'm using a set of pliers and I'm just going to smush down those little hooks so that everything stays in place. So let's grab a spool of twine. And I'm using a 5-inch piece of twine, and I'm going to cut about 20 pieces. It'll just depend on how big your heart is on how many pieces you'll need. And to vary it up with the twine, I'm also going to use some macrame rope, and I'm going to cut those in 5-inch slices as well. And we'll need about 20 pieces of those for this heart. Now we have all of our pieces ready. Let's put this all together. I'm taking one of the pieces of twine to start, and I'm making a U shape. And then I'm going to place the heart over the top. And then we'll take the 2 strings on the end and put that through the U, slide that over the heart and tighten that up. Now let's watch that again using the macrame rope. Now this is the fun part. You just repeat this over and over again until the whole entire heart is completely covered with the different twines and macrame rope. Once you are satisfied with your heart, we'll flip the heart over and lay that out flat. Now grab a small bowl and some Mod Podge, and I'm using the matte Mod Podge because I don't want any shine to this little heart, and I'm just spraying a tiny bit of water in there. I'm not using very much, but I just wanted to thin out that Mod Podge a little bit. Now I'm taking a paintbrush and I'm just going to paint where the knots were on the front side of this heart. I need to set that aside to dry for about a half an hour. Once that is completely dried, what we're going to do is untwist all of the twine and the macrame rope around the heart. Now let's comb everything out so everything is nice and straight, and this will remove a lot of fuzz from your twine. Once you're satisfied with your combing, I take a pair of really sharp scissors, and I'm going to start by trimming around the outside edge, leaving about 1 inch of the overhang. And once I've completed that, I'll go ahead and trim it down a little bit more to about a 1/2 inch around the heart. So I wanted to find a way to hang this heart. So I'm taking a really thin piece of twine, and I'm going to tie a knot around the heart itself first, and then leave the 2 tails left out so that I could hang this however I'd like. You could tie those together to hang them as an ornament. I haven't decided yet where I'm going to hang this, so I left them open. Now a few final touches. In the center of the heart, I'm going to add a sheer bow, and I'm just hot gluing that to the center. And I thought that that bow needed just a tiny bit more, so I took that same thin twine and I cut another little bow. I'm going to attach that over the top of that sheer ribbon. And now this beautiful little heart is ready to hang. You could hang this on a tiered tray, on top of a photo, or you could put this as an ornament on a tree. For our next piece today, we're going to use a wood ornament from the Dollar Tree and the top layer of our napkin. First thing I'm going to do is use a piece of painter's tape to tape down my wood ornament to a paintable surface. Using my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, we're going to coat the whole entire top layer of this wood ornament. Next, we're going to go ahead and grab some Mod Podge, and we're going to paint a layer of Mod Podge over the top of that plaster colored paint. And once the Mod Podge has completely dried, we'll go ahead and set the napkin on the top of our wood ornament. Then grabbed a piece of parchment paper and an iron, and I'm just going to iron down my napkin on this wood ornament. So I would love to hear from you today. If there is something that you would like to see me decoupage or have a question, please leave a comment below and I will do my best to address every one of you. Now that our napkin is attached to our wood ornament, I'm going to do a technique where I do the Mod Podge again over the top of the napkin before sanding down the ornament. And this technique works well if you're not going to put anything on the back side of the ornament like more decoupage, because we do not want it to accidentally stick when it hasn't had time to cure. I use my heat tool to help assist in the drying time of the Mod Podge on top of my heart. I grab my very favorite little sander, my little zip sander, but you can use a sanding block if you'd like instead, and I'm just going to sand off all of the remaining pieces of the napkin. This ornament did have some cutouts in the heart, so I'm placing this on a cutting mat and using an X-Acto knife, and I flip the ornament over so that I can cut any of the remaining pieces of the napkin out of those heart cutouts. Now let's flip that over and see what this looks like. It is so cute. So I wanted to take this piece and I'm going to add this to a black canvas. And this is one of those canvas sets that you can buy at the Dollar Tree. And I'm just hot gluing this heart onto the canvas. More of a polished look, I'm going to add a little bow to the very top of the canvas using some hot glue. Now let's go ahead and add the canvas back to the stand. It's just that simple. We have a beautiful little canvas that we can have on our tiered tray, put it on a desk or on a shelf.